Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today is Wednesday, January 24, 2026. And I need you to do something for me. I need you to just take a deep breath.
Yeah, okay.
Because the document we're about to unpack today, it isn't just a white paper. It isn't just a policy proposal. It honestly reads like the script for a thriller.
It really does. It's tense.
You know, where the bomb is ticking down to zero and the red wire and the blue wire look exactly the same?
Except instead of a bomb, we're staring at a balance sheet. And instead of an explosion, we're looking at, well, a sovereign default.
Right. So the document is called the Emergency Fiscal Stabilization and Balanced Budget Blueprint. It was prepared literally today by an analyst, a guy named Virgil, for a research community.
Yeah.
And the premise is frankly terrifying. It assumes we're living through a Treasury market confidence shock.
Which is a very polite, very academic way of saying a buyer strike.
Big buyer strike. So let's set the scene before we get into the solution. What does that actually look like in the real world?
Yeah, that's the thing.
Because, you know, when we talk about debt crises, we think about Greece in 2010 or Argentina. We don't think about the United States.
That's the psychological hurdle we all have. We're so used to the U.S. Treasury being the risk-free asset of the entire world. But this scenario asks, what happens if the world just stops buying?
Okay.
Imagine foreign central banks just pull back. Or imagine trying to refinance our massive debt becomes impossible. Suddenly, the interest rates on our national debt don't just creep up, they scream through the roof.
So the credit card is maxed out and the bank just locked the doors.
It's worse. The bank is asking for all the money back right now. In this scenario, the deficit, it stops being a political football, a talking point on cable news. It becomes a market variable.
A mechanical crisis.
A mechanical crisis. If you can't sell bonds, checks start to bounce. The military doesn't get fuel, Social Security doesn't clear. This blueprint is basically the emergency manual for keeping the lights on when your credit line gets cut.
And that is our mission today. We are not here to argue politics. We're not here to point fingers at which administration caused this hypothetical mess. We're just looking at the plumbing.
Yes.
This document claims to be a guide on how to fix a nearly $2 trillion hole in the budget in a matter of weeks.
$2 trillion is the magic number, and honestly, the plumbing is where the real story is.
Okay, so let's look at the baseline numbers they give for fiscal year 2025, just to understand how deep this hole is. Total receipts, so money coming in, were about $5.2 trillion.
Right, and total outlays, so money going out, were $7 trillion.
Wow.
Which leaves us with a cash deficit of roughly $1.77 trillion. But here's the number that should really keep you up at night. Net interest payments alone are about $970 billion.
Almost $1 trillion just to pay the interest. That's just wasted money. That's not buying aircraft carriers or paving roads or...
Nope, it's just VIG. It's the cost of borrowing in the past. And that's the danger. In a confidence shock, if interest rates spike, that $1 trillion bill could double overnight. It could consume the entire discretionary budget. And that is why the blueprint argues that, aspirational speeches are useless at this point. The market doesn't care about your promises anymore. You need cash immediately.
Okay, so let's unpack the plan. It's a mix of brute force and some honestly incredibly clever engineering. It's divided into phases. Phase 0 is called triage. This is for days 0 through 14.
And the philosophy here is brutal, but it's necessary. Collectability beats cleverness. In a crisis, you don't need the perfect policy. You need money that actually arrives in the bank account. Fast.
So day 1,
Yeah.
the crisis hits. What is the very first lever they pull?
Immediate cash controls. The first step is what they call an obligation freeze.
Which is basically freezing the credit card.
It's even stricter than that. It's an immediate restriction on most new obligations. See, in government accounting, before you spend money, you obligate it. You sign a contract, you hire someone. This freeze stops the promise from even being made.
But wait, the government is massive. You can't just turn it off like a light switch. People need to eat. The country needs to be defended.
Correct. And the blueprint acknowledges that. It creates a safe list. This is crucial. Debt service, you have to pay the bondholders, or the crisis gets 10 times worse. That's priority 1.
Okay.
Then Social Security and Medicare benefit payments, those continue. Essential defense readiness, core safety nets, disaster response, that stuff keeps flowing.
So grandma still gets her check, and the nukes are still secure. But pretty much everything else
is frozen. And then they do something called an unobligated rescission sweep.
That sounds like the most boring sentence in the English language.
Yeah,
But I have a feeling it's really important.
It sounds boring, but it's actually incredibly aggressive. It's essentially clawing back any money that's just sitting in agency accounts that hasn't been spent yet.
Okay, so give me an example.
Imagine Congress allocated, say, $50 million for a traffic study 3 years ago. The agency hasn't started it yet. The money's just sitting there. This sweep takes a vacuum cleaner to every agency account and just sucks that cash back to the Treasury.
So it's looking for loose change in the sofa cushions, except the cushions are like the Department of Transportation.
Exactly. And then comes the automatic discretionary sequester.
Sequester. That just means cuts.
It does. This is a blunt instrument. It's a uniform percentage reduction in all discretionary budget authority. The document calls it temporary, blunt, credible.
So you're not picking winners and losers here.
No, you aren't debating whether the arts endowment is more important than the Park Service. You are just turning down the volume knob on everything until the cash balance comes back.
And they also mention a procurement pause. So no consultants, no travel, no new IT projects.
Right. And look, we have to be real here. Cutting consultant travel isn't going to find $1.7 trillion.
Yeah, you can't fly coach enough times to balance the U.S. budget. I feel like people always say just cut the waste, but the math just never adds up.
It never adds up. But the point of phase zero isn't to fix the structural problem. It's to stop the bleeding.
Right.
It's to buy you 2 weeks while the big guns come online. Because the real solution, the thing that actually fills the hole, is phase one.
Phase one, the revenue rails.
Yeah.
This is weeks 2 through 6, and this is where the blueprint gets wild. They introduced 2 massive changes designed to turn on what they call a cash fire hose.
And this is where the engineering gets absolutely fascinating. The first rail is a settlement-based financial transaction tax, an FTT.
Okay, let's pause. Usually when people talk about an FTT, it's framed as a way to punish Wall Street, tax the speculators.
The blueprint is very, very clear on this.
Yeah.
This is not a moral statement. It's not about punishment. It's a high-throughput collection rail. The goal is simply to use the existing plumbing of the financial system to collect cash instantly.
But transaction taxes are notoriously hard to implement. I mean, if you tax trading in New York, won't everyone just move their trading to an app in London or Tokyo? Money is fluid.
That is the classic counterargument, capital flight. But this plan anticipates that with something really clever called the two-key lock, or the nexus principle.
I love this detail. Walk me through how this two-key lock actually stops me from dodging the tax.
Okay, so usually taxes try to target the location of the trade. The blueprint just ignores the location. It looks at the identity. The tax applies if either of 2 conditions is met.
Okay.
Key 1 is the financial instrument issued by a U.S. entity. Key 2 is the buyer a U.S. resident.
So let's role play this. I'm a U.S. resident. I want to buy Apple stock.
Yeah.
But I don't want to pay the tax. So I open a brokerage account in London and I buy it there. Do I pay?
You pay because you are a U.S. resident. The U.S. person nexus catches you.
Okay. What if I'm a British guy living in London buying Apple stock in London? I have nothing to do with the U.S. Do I pay?
You pay because Apple is a U.S. issuer. The U.S. issuer, Nexus, catches the instrument itself.
So you basically can't escape it unless you're a foreigner buying foreign stock completely outside the U.S.
Exactly. And why would the U.S. Treasury care about that trade anyway? They've captured the entire relevant ecosystem. It puts a toll booth on the transaction, but not at the app level. It does it at the settlement level.
The settlement level.
Yeah, not when you click buy on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
It happens in the back-end plumbing, in the clearinghouses where the stock actually changes hands from seller A to buyer B. It's invisible to the user, but it's completely inescapable.
That is diabolically smart. What kind of rates are we talking about here? Is this going to crash the market?
That's the risk, right? For equities, they're proposing 10 basis points. That's 0.10%.
Which feels tiny.
It is small per trade, but on the sheer volume of the U.S. market, it's massive revenue. For debt, it's lower, maybe 1 to 2 basis points, because the bond market operates on razor-thin margins. You tax that too high, the gears grind to a halt. But here is the most critical exemption. U.S. Treasuries are taxed at 0 basis points.
Temporarily exempt.
Temporarily. Remember, the whole problem is a buyer's strike on U.S. debt. You do not want to tax the very thing you are desperately trying to get people to buy.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But what about the loophole of, well, I won't buy the stock, I'll just buy an option on the stock?
The parity principle. The plan is way ahead of you. If you tax the steak, you have to tax the burger. If you tax the stock, you must tax the derivative, the option, the swap, the future. If you didn't, the entire market would just shift to synthetics to avoid the tax. So this just blankets all of it.
Okay, so that's rail 1. taxing the flow of money through the markets. But Rail 2. Rail 2 is where I think people listening might start to sweat a little. The employee side withholding surtax.
They call it the solidarity surtax. And again, the logic here is just speed. Why tax employees? Because the payroll withholding system already exists. Every employer in the country already has a pipe connected directly to the Treasury.
But we're in a crisis. Confidence is low. Isn't raising taxes on workers going to just cause a recession?
That is the big danger. So the design here is what they call least recessionary. First, note that it avoids raising costs for employers. If you tax the company, they might fire people to save money.
Okay.
If you tax the employee, the job remains safe, even if the paycheck is smaller.
Safe is a relative term if I can't pay my rent. I'm looking at these rates.
It's progressive. The plan really protects the base. If you make between $0 and $60,000, the rate is 0%.
Okay, so the working class is shielded.
Yes, because those are the households that spend almost everything they earn. They have a high marginal propensity to consume. If you take money from them, they stop buying groceries and the economy collapses. So you just leave them alone.
But once you cross $60,000,
Between $60K and $150K, it's a 1.5% surtax. From $150K up to $400K, it goes to 3.0%, and above $400,000.
it hits 4.5%. Whoa, hang on, 4.5%. That is heavy.
It is.
You're talking about people who are arguably already paying a high marginal rate, state taxes, maybe city taxes. If I'm making $450K, I'm probably living in a high-cost city. I have a mortgage, and now the government is taking another 4.5% right off the top.
It is heavy. There is no sugarcoating it. It is a pay cut.
Is that politically suicidal? I mean, who votes for that?
In normal times, absolutely suicidal. You'd be laughed out of Washington. But remember the context. This is January 2026. The Treasury market has seized up. The alternative isn't things stay the same.
Right.
The alternative is the dollar collapses, hyperinflation kicks in, and that $450K salary becomes worthless in terms of purchasing power anyway.
So the pitch is basically pay this tax or lose everything else.
That's the bargain. It's the solidarity surtax because everyone with a job is paying something to keep the ship afloat.
And I notice they have a catch for people who try to dodge this, the non-wage capture, because rich people don't always take a salary.
Exactly. If you're a CEO or a consultant, maybe you take stock options or contract income. The plan mandates withholding on large brokerage proceeds and 1099 flows. If you sell $1 million of stock, the broker has to withhold a chunk of it right there, just like a paycheck. You can't 1099 your way out of this.
So phase one gets the cash flowing, the fire hose is on, but the document warns that this is just a bridge. The FTT and the surtax, they're temporary. To actually fix the problem for good, you need phase two, structural stabilization.
And this is the reality check. You can't fix a $7 trillion spending habit with just temporary emergency taxes. You have to change the actual structure of the budget.
And this is where we touch the third rail.
You have to. If you look at the federal budget, it's basically an insurance company with an army, Social Security, Medicare, and defense. You literally cannot balance the budget without touching them.
So what does the blueprint propose? Are they slashing benefits?
Not slashing, no, more like shaving, and specifically targeting the top. For Social Security, they suggest temporary holdbacks or slower cost of living adjustments, COBLAs, but only for high-income beneficiaries.
So they aren't freezing the check for the person who relies on it to eat.
Exactly. It's means-tested pain. For Medicare, they suggest provider payment freezes and premium surcharges for wealthy seniors. For defense, it's about delaying New START programs.
It's interesting, the document points out the math here. Just 5% of these massive programs equals nearly $180 billion a year.
That's the scale we are dealing with. Because the base is so huge, trillions of dollars. Small percentage changes yield these massive savings. You don't need to destroy the programs to save the budget, but you do need to trim them.
All right, so we've frozen the obligations, we've turned on the tax fire hose, and we've restructured the big programs. But here's the part of the document that really stopped me in my tracks, the credibility mechanism.
Yes. This is the most radical part of the plan. It's what I call the robot enforcer.
It prioritizes self-execution beats promises. Explain that.
Yeah.
Because usually Congress promises to cut spending later, and then later just never comes.
Exactly. In a normal political environment, Congress passes a budget and then, well, ignores it. But in a confidence shock, the market doesn't believe Congress anymore. So this plan sets up a system where the Treasury publishes a monthly scorecard. Cash in versus target.
And if they miss a target?
Automatic triggers. This is the robot. If the cash is low, the surtax rate automatically steps up, say plus 0.25%.
Without a vote.
Without a vote.
And if the taxes hit some kind of preset cap?
Then automatic spending sequesters kick in. The cuts happen by themselves. The algorithm just takes over.
That sounds kind of undemocratic. You're basically
Exactly.
taking the power of the purse away from Congress and giving it to a spreadsheet.
That is the philosophical debate right there, isn't it? But the argument the blueprint makes is that during a solvency crisis, you need credibility. And the only way to be credible is to remove your own ability to flake out on your promises. It shifts the burden of inertia. Usually, inertia means nothing gets fixed. Under this plan, inertia means the budget balances itself. Congress has to actively vote to stop the fix, which is much harder to do politically than just doing nothing.
It's like tying yourself to the mast of the ship.
That's a perfect analogy.
But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. They mention automatic sunsets.
Yes, and this is crucial for selling the plan to the public. The blueprint states that after 4 consecutive quarters of balance, so 1 full year of fiscal health, the emergency taxes turn off automatically.
So it's a promise. We are doing this to save the ship, not to permanently take your money.
Exactly. It frames the taxes as a wartime measure where the war is against national bankruptcy.
We've covered so much: the freeze, the tax rails, the robot enforcer. But I want to go back to the why. Why even write this document?
Because when the crisis hits, you won't have time to think. Appendix A in the document describes something they call a dial sheet.
I like that visualization.
Yeah, it presents the fiscal plan as a machine. You set a target, let's say 0 deficit. You define the penalty for missing it, taxes go up or spending goes down, and then you just let it run. It implies that in a confidence shock, the market doesn't trust speeches. It doesn't trust politicians.
It trusts algorithms.
It trusts algorithms,
Yeah.
and it trusts cash in the bank.
And that leads me to a final provocative thought for everyone listening. You know, we live in a democracy where we value debate and negotiation. But this source suggests that in a true crisis, the most effective government might be one that runs on autopilot, removing human discretion entirely.
It raises a massive question. Does true fiscal stability require us to admit that we can't trust ourselves? If we can't make the hard choices, do we need to build a machine that makes them for us?
Big government by algorithm. It's a fascinating, if maybe slightly terrifying, vision of the future. We've listed the breakdown of those tax bands and the full timeline in the show notes. Definitely take a look because the details of that Nexus tax are just wild. Thanks for diving in with us.
Thanks for having me.
See you next time.